Anyone familiar with 19th century history will have a vivid impression of the aristocratic women of the time, with their cinched waists, white-painted faces, and bright red blush. This 19th century beauty standard was neither a sudden recommendation by some fashion influencer, nor a style women found comfortable. Rather, it was an imitation of the appearance of those suffering from a particular illness, tuberculosis. What exactly is tuberculosis? And why did Europeans in the 19th century adopt this sickly look? Tuberculosis, a pulmonary infectious disease caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, does not immediately cause symptoms after infection, unlike other infectious diseases. Instead, tuberculosis bacteria lure the immune system into a response. When the immune system damages the organs in its effort to fight the invaders, the bacteria seize the opportunity to cause tuberculosis. Although it is called pulmonary tuberculosis, the bacteria's attack is not confined to the lungs. After forming lesions in the lungs, they can spread through the bloodstream and lymphatic system to other parts of the body, causing extrapulmonary tuberculosis. Initially, tuberculosis patients may only exhibit mild symptoms like low fever, night sweats, fatigue, and loss of appetite. Gradually, it progresses to coughing, hemoptysis, and chest tightness. This process can take anywhere from a year to several decades. If the disease is not effectively controlled, patients may ultimately die from respiratory failure. The history of tuberculosis in human society can be traced back 6,000 years to Italy and Egypt. For wealthy families, tuberculosis, though troublesome, was not immediately fatal. With adequate rest, life could continue as usual, earning it the description disease of the rich. For the poor and more susceptible lower classes, this debilitating and expensive-to-treat disease was akin to death knocking at their door. Even if tuberculosis itself was not fatal, the resulting weakness and inability to work often led to death from starvation and poverty. Hence, tuberculosis was also nicknamed the disease of the poor. The fact that a single disease could symbolize both poverty and wealth is quite paradoxical. Tuberculosis is an infectious disease transmitted through airborne droplets. Its mechanism involves taking advantage of the immune system's response to damaged organs, thus causing lesions. Therefore, it has a higher incidence rate in already fragile lungs. Tuberculosis, prevalent since the 17th century, saw a significant increase in incidence by the 19th century and earned the name White Plague. This was due to Europe being in the midst of the Industrial Revolution, which led to numerous sanitation issues in rapidly growing cities, creating a breeding ground for the spread of tuberculosis. The declining air quality from industrial development also damaged people's lungs, facilitating the invasion of tuberculosis bacteria. Consequently, during an era of rapid industrial and medical advancements, tuberculosis dealt a heavy blow to humanity's pride, with the burden falling mostly on lower-class workers and children. A report from the London Trades Council in 1883 indicated that 1/3 of workers died from tuberculosis. Research from the Hospital for Sick Children in London showed that 45% of child deaths were due to tuberculosis. In the face of such a large-scale infectious disease, no one was unaffected. Literary figures who succumbed to tuberculosis included Anton Chekhov, one of the world's 3 great short story writers, Franz Kafka, author of The Metamorphosis, and the British poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, who wrote, "If winter comes, can spring be far behind?" Even today, despite our understanding of its causes, pathology, and transmission, the fight against tuberculosis remains arduous due to issues like drug resistance and co-infection with HIV. In some underdeveloped regions, tuberculosis remains a major threat. According to the World Health Organization's 2021 Global Tuberculosis Report, there were 9.87 million new tuberculosis cases worldwide in 2020, with the majority occurring in Southeast Asia and Africa. In the face of the overwhelming tuberculosis epidemic, people remained helpless for a long time. However, unlike before, people displayed an unusual endorsement of tuberculosis, even to the point of finding beauty in illness. Those familiar with 19th century literature will undoubtedly know Alexandre Dumas Files's debut novel, The Lady of the Camellias. The heroine, Marguerite, was considered a peerless beauty at the time. She was tall and somewhat thin, with an unprecedented charm and allure. Even her pale complexion and faint smile made the narrator's heart flutter. However, Marguerite was a tuberculosis patient. Her thinness, pallor, and rosy cheeks were all results of tuberculosis. People did not shun her because of this. Instead, they passionately praised her beauty and eagerly admired her. Alexandre Dumas Files's literary works are renowned for their realism, and this was indeed true. Women of the time did not fear the sickly appearance of tuberculosis patients. Instead, they actively sought to imitate it. To mimic the emaciation of tuberculosis sufferers, they would tightly bind themselves with iron corsets, which compressed their internal organs. To achieve the pale complexion of tuberculosis patients, they risked lead poisoning by applying layers of white lead powder to their faces. The flushed cheeks of feverish tuberculosis patients were achieved with rouge. Of course, if one didn't want to go through all this effort, there was a shortcut. Simply get close to a tuberculosis patient and get infected. The near-pathological aesthetic of 19th century women was significantly influenced by the prevalent beliefs of the time. Alexandre Dumas père, the father of Alexandre Dumas Files, was an ardent admirer of tuberculosis. He once seriously stated that having tuberculosis in 1823 and 1824 was fashionable and made considerable efforts to pursue this trend. Unfortunately, due to his strong immune system, after several attempts to get infected by deliberately approaching tuberculosis patients, Dumas père failed and had to resort to falsely claiming he had tuberculosis. However, there was a reason behind his seemingly bizarre behavior. He and his son, Alexandre Dumas Files, both fell in love with a woman named Marie Duplessis, who is said to be the inspiration for the character of Marguerite in The Lady of the Camellias. But Dumas père, being overweight and thus not fitting the beauty standards of the time, attempted to use contracting tuberculosis as a means to lose weight quickly. While Alexandre Dumas père failed in his attempt to contract the disease, other fortunate ones succeeded in contracting tuberculosis. For instance, the British poet Lord Byron wished to die of tuberculosis so that women could say, "Look at poor Byron, he was still so charming when he died." He soon got his wish. In 1824, Byron caught a severe cold after being caught in the rain. His weakened body quickly succumbed to tuberculosis, and he passed away later that year at the age of 36. The British poet Percy Bysshe Shelley also envied his friend John Keats for having tuberculosis. In a letter to Keats, Shelley wrote, "Tuberculosis is a mark of favor towards those with such a remarkable gift for writing as you." Shelley's remark likely stemmed from his own experience with tuberculosis. Like Keats, Shelley had a long history with the disease. However, unlike Keats, Shelley did not live to be praised by ladies for dying elegantly from tuberculosis. Instead, he tragically died in a shipwreck, missing out on what Alexandre Dumas père called the most fashionable death. It may seem absurd, but tuberculosis worship truly existed in 19th century Europe, especially in the fields of literature and art. This was partly due to the characteristics of tuberculosis patients, but more so to the confusion and uncertainty about social development at the time. Tuberculosis patients often experience a mild fever in the afternoon. Unlike regular fevers that make one feel groggy, this low-grade fever brings an unbounded enthusiasm. When the fever subsides at night, patients become exceptionally lucid and excited. Anyone who has stayed up late understands the unique catalytic effect of nighttime quietness on the brewing and bursting of inspiration. Tuberculosis patients experience this as well. Additionally, facing a terminal illness and the progressive weakness of their bodies, they inevitably ponder the meaning of life and death. Such contemplation of life has always been a boundless source of artistic inspiration. Thus, it is no surprise that tuberculosis patients were more likely to become distinguished artists. As the fame and status of artists suffering from tuberculosis rose, social admiration for tuberculosis naturally followed. While famous figures had an influential effect, they alone could not persuade masses of people to try to contract the disease. The profound impact of tuberculosis was rooted in the social realities of the time. From today's perspective, the industrial revolutions of the 18th and 19th centuries greatly improved people's lives. However, for those living through these times, the Industrial Revolution brought a series of problems. Workers flocking to cities for factory jobs had to endure harsh living conditions, and even middle-class writers and artists were not exempt. Even families with decent living conditions had to contend with filthy, chaotic city environments and air repeatedly polluted by factory emissions. The fast-paced life brought by the Industrial Revolution shattered the long-standing peaceful and leisurely lifestyle. Faced with such immense social changes, many people lost hope for the future. The daily noise and chaos forced them to reconsider the meaning of life. When life had become monotonous and death inevitable, why not choose a calm, peaceful, and dignified death from tuberculosis? Moreover, the association of tuberculosis with melancholy and talent made it even more appealing. Confronted with an uncertain and irreversible reality, people in the 19th century used their praise of tuberculosis as a means to question the world. In today's increasingly industrialized world, the mysteries of tuberculosis have been unveiled, allowing us to glimpse an era's silhouette through the passionate and uninhibited lives of these artists who lived facing death.